You hear all this talk of climate change, this environmental stuff, this ESG, but what can you actually do?
Helping helped businesses avoid 74,000 tonnes of carbon emissions, which is quite a big number, but at the same time, those businesses have saved $100 million. So sustainability right now is the low-hanging fruit. It's got really good business benefit behind it. Later on, it is going to get...
And how can you do it in a way that makes your business money?
Our model is to charge not very much, but on an annuity basis. So rather than getting paid for it all up front, you get paid month by month by month. And so in whatever, 5-10 years' time, that accumulates and suddenly you're looking at quite a lot of money. And at that point in time, you start making profit.
So that's what this one's about. All right, well, let's kick into it. So I like to say every podcast just to see who the person is and what they do. So how would you sort of encapsulate what you do?
So what do? I run a company that helps other businesses reduce their carbon emissions. And so we've got a whole bunch of smart people who develop some software and a whole bunch of smart people who provide advice. And we talk to mainly large and enterprise-sized businesses in New Zealand and a few other countries around the world. And help them get to where we all should be.
Okay, cool. Well, let's unpack you a little bit. Go way back, because I think, the sustainability is very topical, and we'll get into it. But where are you from? Where are you born?
Hamilton.
Oh, you escaped. Good man.
Yeah. Well, most of us escape, I think. Yeah.
I heard it was rated one of the top places in New Zealand in terms of beauty with Wanganui.
Yeah, interesting. It's normally other things. But I won't go there. It was interesting growing up there. It was cool. I had a good childhood. We had a good time. And it was nice. But that's at that stage, that's all you know. Yeah. What
were you at school? Were you the nerd, the jock? What were you?
I was kind of down the middle.
Weirdo?
No, I played a bunch of sports, and we did pretty well.
What sport were you?
Football and volleyball, soccer and volleyball.
Huh.
Yeah, my main two, but I played basketball and others. Stayed away from anything that took more than 4 hours. Yeah.
So you can jump, huh?
I was the setter. I couldn't jump.
Jeez.
Yeah, but they got to. I figured the setter gets to touch the ball every time, and they never have to go off. So,
fair.
Most fun position on the pitch. You get no glory, but that's okay. I'm not after the glory. You just get to play a lot.
Yeah, so you cracked it because no one wants that position, huh?
It makes it really easy. Yeah, I fell into it. I don't seem to be all right at it, but fell into it, and especially if you can't jump, it really helps. So it's good.
What we like? Did you ever go like championships or anything like that, or regional?
We were tier 2, so we did go to the tier 2 regionals over in Tauranga, but we never made it down to. I think the tier 1 is New Plymouth or Palmy. Can't remember which one, but never got there. Soccer-wise, we were good. Yeah, we did pretty well on that and played in nationals and did well.
Oh, watch out! So were you on the bench or you starter?
No, I was captain of both.
You're captain of the volleyball and
volleyball.
Of football.
Yeah. So
why do you think that is? What do you think they picked in you? Don't get tall poppy syndrome right now.
No, possibly the same reason on both. Navigating the different individuals involved, and that probably doesn't ever change in your life, and probably is what I do now. As as CEO, you're pulling together teams and trying to make them work. So it's kind of the same thing, and I think I was probably doing it back then.
What was something? Because I've been captain a lot of my sporting career. I don't know why. I didn't back myself at all.
No, same. It's always a surprise. It was like, me? Why?
Did you try things out from a captain standpoint at school? Or you try how do I motivate this team, or how do I get an example, or what were your lessons, or you just sort of had the title and did nothing?
I don't know, you're a teenage boy, I'm not sure you're that consciously competent of that sort of stuff way back then, but it was, you learn a lot, usually in hindsight, usually the things you did wrong, and there are always, really good players in the team, and it's a matter of working as a team, so they do really well, but also everyone else gets to, make the whole team work, because it's not a single person's game, neither of them. So,
if you were to go back with all your knowledge as a CEO, how would you run the soccer team to achieve success?
Spend more time talking to them and focusing on that teamwork piece, I think, because you've got the coach, and everyone looks up to the coach physically and literally and virtually, whatever. But and so it's really the coach that does the most of that in high school. And whereas I think as a CEO, then there is no coach, it's you, So if I was to take more of a leadership position back then, that's what my counsel would be, is to talk to the team a bit more and give them that micro coaching that the bigger, that the coach isn't able to do.
Because I never actually thought of from a sporting standpoint. Didn't know where I would go there, but I noticed with training sales teams that they didn't really care what I said. It was more the person in the trenches. Because my viewpoint is completely out of touch to their experience in a way. Either it's their pedestaling, what's for me is different for them. So,
100%.
Oh yeah, similar. So how do you, like, you say the same thing, but someone in a different position says the same thing, but it hits different?
Yeah. No, it's, CEO's master of all trades and jack of none, and or vice versa, jack of all trades and master of none. And so I was running sales, but we've got a new head of sales in the team, and some of the things that I wasn't able to do, and he's doing so much better, is spending time in the trenches, in deals with clients, and helping move those forward, and just bringing those specific skills to bear. And so I think, everybody's really important in that. Certain people, nobody's more or less important. Everyone's got their own skills, and they bring that to bear. So I think that's it. That's that whole team thing.
How do you sell, like, environmental, like, because essentially you're selling a perception in a way. Like, sure, they might care. That's unusual for businesses, in my opinion. It's usually how do you make more money, but they do care, but they still want to make more money. And you're coming in being like, well, this could potentially cost you more money, but people think you're doing a good job, or it actually saves them money.
Yeah, it's an interesting time. So there are a bunch of businesses that have been doing this for quite a long time. That's one of the really interesting things. They've been, carbon zero or saving carbon emissions for 10, 12 years, which back then it wasn't a thing, so they didn't really talk about it, but they were doing it, and they were such forward-looking businesses that they were embedding that all the way back then, which is amazing. Really we're at now, as we describe it, we're moving through those kind of early adopters who did start early, and we're often large companies. There's a bunch of really good smaller companies doing it too, but entering the kind of the mainstream, the early majority. So certainly not the entire majority, but the earlier ones that are just starting to get it and get moving forward. So that's very cool. Now, one of the things we do is, we've worked in the space for a long time, so we've just updated our impact statement, and so we talk about helping helped businesses avoid 74,000 tonnes of carbon emissions, which is quite a big number, but at the same time, those businesses have saved $100 million. So sustainability right now is the low-hanging fruit. It's got really good business benefit behind it. Later on, it is going to get tougher. The actual business case will get outweighed as we deal with the easier things, the things with they're easier to business case and get across the line. It's actually quite easy to save carbon and reduce costs. Later on, as we take away all those easy ones and get into the harder ones, then the business case gets tougher and tougher. So, we say sustainability makes good business sense, and right now it certainly does. And ideally, as businesses move through their easy ones into the more difficult ones, technology moves forward, and we all have changed our attitudes towards it. So the knowledge and experience around the industry has increased a huge amount. The fact that more businesses are doing it is really helping other businesses, and people move between businesses and bring their experience. That's super helpful. But right now it's a really good thing to do financially and environmentally.
Well, imagine, because a lot of your clients, governments and publicly listed companies, imagine, like, especially, I don't know who it is, I think it's BlackRock that's got like these ESG criteria, and you've got to fit those, and that's going to help you be on their listings, and you get all that money. And do you find there's a variance in terms of the motivation of different businesses and what leads to the motivation? Yeah.
I mean, a year ago even, we'd be talking to a director of a business, and they may not care. It wasn't on their agenda at all. This year it really is. For the last 2 odd years, the Institute of Directors, they produce their, the top 5 things that directors care about. And for the last couple of years, climate change has been on that, which is good. But even then, many of the directors had other problems to deal with. We're coming out of COVID and all sorts of things. But now there's a massive increase in engagement from directors from all levels in the business about moving forward, which is fantastic. So it's definitely getting better, and the conversations are getting easier to get to the people that really can make a difference, make the decisions and drive the change, that even a year or two ago it was much, much more difficult. Yeah.
So what are you actually doing? So you're like, we're going to improve your environmental component with your business. What do you, let's use an example. Like, what are you, like, you go to a bank or you go to a large company and you're like, ta-da, less trees are burnt. Like, chopped up for paper. What are you doing?
So there's 2 parts, right? You've got to do the reporting, but you've got to go, this is where we are. And we always say publicly report because it holds yourself to account. So if you say, it's 84 million tonnes or, whatever your number is, usually it's a pretty big number. And then there's the reduce part. Some of the reduce things you can just get on with are kind of no-brainers. If it's, say, all your fleet is coming up for lease, you should be looking at EVs. Now, we don't do any of the consulting work or anything around cars or fleets, but, there's a bunch of things you can get on with. But at the same time, you also need to do the accounting to work out what your number is. And when you work out what the number is, it all gets put into different categories and scopes, and that's what the carbon accounting tools do. And then that allows you to see where your biggest emission sources are, so then you can target that. So if your biggest emission sources is cars, then great, you know where to focus. If your biggest emission sources is flights, then you know where to focus. If it's electricity and gas, again, it allows you to target where you can make the biggest impact first. Because as I say, the first ones you attack are going to be the easiest ones. That makes a lot of sense. And then the momentum builds. And the way we look at it is the businesses that will succeed in the future will integrate sustainability into how they operate. Right now, if you look at big sporting events, pretty much most of the logos will be tech companies. They are the ones sponsoring the events. You look 5 years ago, it was alcohol and cigarettes. So as things move forward, the next 5 years probably will be companies that have built sustainability into the way they operate, and they are getting the competitive advantage. So it's quite a big transition moment, we think, in terms of how businesses operate, and the ones that really start to integrate sustainability are the ones that people will buy from more and more. And, they'll be the ones that are sponsoring the sports events in 5-10 years' time, because they're the ones that lead the way. So it won't be the oil companies anymore. It'll be kind of the good guys, if you will.
The good guys. I think, I can be a bit simple at times. So to sort of grasp it, you help them with reporting.
Yeah.
And then you give them ideas on how to reduce the highlighted issues from the reporting.
Yeah, so we as a business focus on one part of it, which is primarily called Scope 2, which is basic your electricity and your gas. So if you are a large business that uses lots of buildings, lots of electricity, we help you get that usage down, or can help you convert from gas boilers or whatever to electricity. So that's the main focus of what we do. We've got a very, very long 20-year plus heritage in that space. So like I say, we don't deal with moving to EVs and all the other complicated things that need to occur. So when we help with reduce, that's our focus. So for example, a lot of the buildings around Auckland and the rest of the country, we monitor. So we have metering devices in all of them, and we pull that data into the cloud, and we've got a bunch of consultants who look at that, and clients look at it, and they can identify what buildings, etc., they should target and which ones are performing badly, and then they can work on those to get their energy use down. So so we worked with one of the councils around through COVID, super interesting. So they were able to log into the building, understand if it's library that the energy was off, but 2 times a day it would come back on, send some fresh air around the building and then turn off again, so that they could keep everything at the right temperature, the right air freshness, etc., but minimise energies. But they could do that all remotely, which is kind of cool because they weren't at that stage allowed into the buildings. But you can apply that to everything else as well. So making sure that everything's working in the optimum fashion. Yeah, so that's our area of specialisation in terms of reducing energy. So it's complicated, and only the big companies really benefit. So if you're a small business, I mean, it's really about turning the lights out, which isn't a massive change, to be honest. Hence the reason most of the effort's actually been focused in those big businesses, because the numbers are just bigger and they can afford to have people telling them how they can reduce energy or whatever.
Yeah. So interesting. I mean, it makes sense. Hey, big company, we'll make it easier for you to understand where you're leaking a whole lot of costs, and you're helping the environment.
Yeah.
Do they get like a tick as well? Like, do you get, like how the health tick on whatever? Is there like a version of that?
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of things. So the most recognised one around is from Toitu. They've got their carbon zero certification. So the businesses, they go out and they do their carbon accounting. They add all the numbers up and they say, this is our number. Toitu verify that and go, is this legit? Which is like a financial audit essentially, but for carbon. And then if they carbon zero, which most businesses aren't, they normally are offsetting at the moment. So they're buying carbon offsets, like if you fly on a plane and you can click the button to say, offset my emissions. They offset that, and then by the same amount, and that gives them the carbon zero certification. So I think Toitu were doing 800 odd businesses the last time I looked. It's quite a lot of businesses, large ones and small ones. So there's that kind of tick. There's a couple of other companies. Ecos is very strong in the space, and there's a few others. Equally for buildings, there's certifications for that. So we do, if you have a look around a bunch of buildings, you'll increasingly see things like Green Star certifications or Neighbours certifications. So that tells you how well that building performs from an energy efficiency environment perspective. So those are coming in. They're now mandated in some certain size government buildings, which is fantastic. Perfectly honest, we expect that to be more pervasive. In Australia, any office building over a certain size, quite small, has to be mandatorily Neighbours rated, which that scheme is from Australia. We've imported it here but haven't rolled it out as actively as Australians have. But that's made a big difference over there, and we believe it'll become more pervasive over here too. So there's lots of things. So it means, smaller businesses can move into a Neighbours 4-star, 5-star, 6-star building and know that that building's performing, and they're therefore optimised in terms of their energy use. So that part of their carbon emissions are taken care of, and they can focus on, their cars or their flights or their other things that they do.
It was mainly the reason I was asking was like, let's say you get this big company that come in, you do all the analysis of their electrical stuff, and then, they decrease that cost. Does that help them in passing a certain criteria? Yeah.
So, like I say, if the smaller the number, the better, right? So it just means you're impacting the environment less. So that helps them get down to that level. If they want a certification, say from Toitu to be carbon zero, then their cost to do their offsetting's a lot less. They can either pay more and still end up carbon zero, or pay less and be carbon zero. We don't. We agree with offsets; they're kind of needed right now, but obviously the goal should be reducing your emissions, not just buying your way out of it. So there is that aspect. Yeah. But,
it sounds like not too much of a hard sell. It depends on how you charge, but it's like, hey, how would you like to reduce your costs dramatically?
Yeah, one would think. One would think
they got to believe
it's harder than it. Yeah, exactly. And everyone's got priorities. It's particularly if you're running a large manufacturing plant, the last thing you want is a machine breaking down. You that's your focus, to keep things production running as optimized as possible, and you've got people to deal with and all that sort of stuff. And now you've got to deal with carbon, and is that really important when surely you just want me to run the machine really well? But as those things become more and more important to directors and the bosses and stuff like that, then they start becoming more important to the operations teams and those sorts of things. So it takes a little while to filter through, but like I say, it's getting there, which is pretty cool.
What would you, so on average, maybe not specific data, but let's say you have a building, it's a large corporation,
Yep.
and you drop their cost by a certain amount. Do you sort of know what that is, or is it sometimes vary, or it doesn't?
No,
sometimes you don't.
Well, yes and no. So if you're in an office building, you should be able to get, and it's a moderately aged one. Most of our building stock's reasonably old. There's obviously a bunch of new ones getting built down the waterfront. If it's not a brand new building, you're probably going to be able to improve it by 20%. So that's not too bad. Just and that's pretty quick. And then after that, so there's a bunch we do down the waterfront that are over 30% now. Energy savings, which add up, when you're talking 7,000 people, I think, in the whole lot of them. It's a lot of people housed in there, so there's a lot of energy getting used. So, the savings add up. So that's pretty cool.
What would be a dollar value? Like on some clients, you don't say who, but we saved them $1 million in a year or something,
$1 million. Well, there are some clients that we're definitely saving $1 million a year.
Year on year, before you met them.
Yeah, since year on year. So since the time they first started to now, and relative to their baseline, they're saving over $1 million a year.
Just charge on that 50/50.
Yeah, no, it'd be nice, wouldn't it?
Shouldn't it?
It'd be nice, and it's like insurance, though. It's sort of like if you don't need it, but you can't stop, because as soon as you stop, the energy use goes back up again. That's the thing, because there's all your systems get older, and you've got to keep an eye on that. It's like playing whack-a-mole. As soon as you kind of take your eye off, it pops back up, and you've got to whack it down again. So particularly if you've got a large environment, or the councils, etc. 2,500 buildings around Auckland, etc., or even more. It's a lot of things to keep your eye on at once, and you can't do that manually. You can't just walk out to a building and trundle through it. You need 500 people doing that all the time to keep it in control, whereas if you use technology, you can. So that's the space that we play in. We try and apply technology to the problem. We all say we have a productivity problem in New Zealand, and look to technology as the way to help your way out of that. So yeah, we do well in those large, complex environments where there's too much going on for one person to kind of look at. And in manufacturing plants where you've got a whole bunch of machinery and processes running, being able to have technology that can keep an eye on it for you really helps the property managers or operations managers stuff. So it does tend to be big companies, to be fair, but they're the ones that are emitting the most. So it's kind of start there. It's great when the small to medium businesses get onto it. That's awesome, and we all have a part to play for sure. But it's the big emitters that need to get their numbers down.
So, because this is a bit naive, and I don't know the mechanics of it, and you probably lose money with this idea. But so what stops you going to these large corporations, being like, hey, we'll do a quick assessment on where you could save it, and then in your mind you're like, okay, this is going to be a big saving, and then say to them, yo, don't pay us anything now. 50% over the next 5 years of the costs we save.
Yeah. So that happens a lot in the States.
Okay.
It's called a thing that I suddenly can't remember. The issue is most of the ones in this, I believe it's more than 50% end up in court. So take, for example, take COVID. There was a 9% reduction in energy use over that year through the monitoring that we do, which looks fantastic. But who gets the credit for that? Do we get money for it because they reduced emissions, or did they keep it because they didn't have anyone in their buildings and shut them down because of the systems we provide? So, or do you end up in court because you're arguing over it? And that's the problem. It's quite difficult to really have a clear contract in place that just works, which is why, America maybe is a bit more litigious than we are here, but it's quite difficult, and that's why it hasn't tended to be a model. There is one company doing it. I don't really know how they're doing around it, but yeah, so it pops up every now and then. There's a whole industry generated to create statistical models that identify baselines that essentially said that if this happens, that happens, and this happens, then this is what your baseline should be, then what you should produce. And if it's below that, we'll keep it, and if it's above that, well, your problem. but they're really complicated. We've got a few clients on those, but they're really super complicated. And to be honest, the administration's more difficult than it's worth. So yeah, it's a good idea, but the practicalities and the commercial realities around it make it a bit difficult, and it just hasn't been accepted over here particularly much.
Yeah, because then you might get a new machine or a new thing, and then the conditions aren't the same. And
yeah, it's all you then decide to put a data center on the floor, and your energy use goes up, or you take your data center out and the energy use goes down. Well, whose joy is that? So yeah, it's just a bit hard.
Yeah, I'm always just curious how you would sell something. It's just interesting because that's a compelling offer, but the deliverability of it's unrealistic. Because I imagine you probably have to have a high upfront cost. Well, a valuable upfront support.
I'd like to think so.
And then you got to go through that and all these key decision makers, and then they're like, oh, maybe we don't care that much about carbon, but we say we do.
Yeah, well, that was the problem with COVID. With everybody, nobody knew what's going on, particularly in the building space. All the tenants were heading home. So it's like, well, pretty difficult. Anything that was budgeted, well, not even budgeted, anything that was in a proposal just went back into the pot. And it was like, well, no, we're not doing that because we don't know what 3 months is going to look like. So kind of a lot of things stopped at that point in time just because people were in survival mode, or businesses were in survival mode. So yeah, that was pretty tough. But as we come through now, building performance ratings, energy efficiency, carbon accounting in the built environment has just really gone mainstream. The pickup there has been amazing. We work with a lot of the property managers now, and they're really on board. It's really impressive. And what we see is the professional property managers they're really onto it. They often deal with large international landlords who, actually own the building, but the property managers here, they're looking after them for them. And then obviously we have a bunch of large listed companies, and again, they're the same. They're really onto that stuff. The privately owned landlords or the syndicates, they're a little less active because they're kind of sitting there. They don't care about their drivers are a little bit different, whereas the commercial lot are quite transparent to the market. So property values going up and down, and all of that changes all the time. It's out in the market. It's very clear. Whereas the private investors, it's not as clear. They don't have to declare anything. So they're less active in the space. And from what I remember, it's about 45%, I think, are private investors. So we'd love to be able to unlock them. The public and the publicly listed ones and the professional managed ones. They're awesome. They're really onto it now.
So just on that, the reason I look away sometimes is because this only goes for 30 minutes and I push a button so it doesn't hit save. You've done 27 minutes, just FYI. What's that like to sell that? So you got these large conglomerates, huge decision makers. I was talking to a guy selling something for like a few $1 million, and I was like, I can't even fathom that, but because the art is getting to the decision maker and then also equipping that decision maker to progress to another stage, so then you can get in front of these other people, and then they think about it for 6 months, and you've got to pay your staff. How did you start? What was your...
Yeah, so it's even worse than that in SaaS. You don't hear software as a service companies, Xero, etc. They lose money for a long time because our model is to charge not very much, but on an annuity basis. So rather than getting paid for it all up front, you get paid month by month by month. And so in whatever 5-10 years time, that accumulates, and suddenly you're looking at quite a lot of money. And at that point in time, you start making profit. So yeah, it's not even just the sales cycle of trying to find the person to talk to and talking to them, but then also actually, because we try and keep the costs down and it's a subscription model, then it takes a long time again, even to recoup your investment costs. Well, that's probably why I started talking about the fact that it is easy. It's the rising tide is lifting all boats. The knowledge out there is so much higher, and the directors are engaged and the executive are engaged, and so that first bit about finding the people and getting to them and having the conversation about why is so much easier than it used to be. And there's new legislation out there that came out in New Zealand in January, and that's affecting about 170 of our not necessarily largest, but some of our largest companies, and they are now legislated that they have to produce a full carbon accounting report publicly. And so that's really moved them into gear. And so legislation's really moving it forward. And one of the interesting things, if you're in the industry, is that deals with what's called Scope 3, which is really about your supply chain, your upstream and downstream consequences. So the people you buy off and potentially the people you sell to. And so in terms of the people you buy off, and you're having to account for the emissions that they create in the production of the work that they do for you. So if they have to drive trucks around to deliver goods to your door or that sort of stuff, you now need to start accounting for them, which gets really complicated. But what's interesting is as you then want to reduce your carbon emissions because you want to have a good number and you want to be a good corporate citizen and keep your social license up and all those good things, you're then looking at your suppliers to go, well, I want my suppliers to reduce their emissions because that's affecting me. So then you start choosing suppliers based on their carbon emissions. And so the trickle down from those 170 companies just gets kind of bigger and bigger. If you're a 5-person company, it's not really going to touch you for quite a long time because it's quite hard, this stuff. And so if you've got, we're talking to somebody today, 4,500 suppliers, you can only really focus on the top 250 of those first because they're going to be your biggest emitters. And if you work with them to reduce it or choose vendors that have got lower carbon emissions, that will help you get your footprint down, and that's your first goal. And so there's kind of a Darwinian, natural selection process that's going to start happening where people choose vendors who are committed to the same cause that they are. So yeah, that's when it starts affecting everyone, every business and every individual. So yeah.
Well, it makes sense as well. If you're going for these big guys and these big guys are going to influence the less big guys or they're the biggest clients for these other big guys, then you keep going down, hopefully.
Yeah, and even, the banks now need to, choosing the banks, they need to account for their what's called financed emissions. So anything that they finance, whether it's a car, a house or a business, they need to start accounting for the emissions associated with that. A, you can imagine how complicated that is. But B, you can imagine the next impact of that is they'll start financing things that are lower emissions. And this is where these green loans come in. So, financing cars, if they finance an EV, then that's much better on their footprint than it is if they're financing a traditional ICE vehicle. So, internal combustion engine vehicle. Yeah, so in businesses, the same thing. So, would they rather finance somebody who's belching out coal smoke or a, low carbon intensive business? And so they will start from putting their investor dollars into various places. And same with the built environment. Their property teams are providing green loans to buildings that are, Green Star rated, NABERS rated, or financing improvements that help businesses and buildings become better performing. Yeah,
it's interesting. It's like even if we didn't have all the legislation and even if there was no such thing as climate change, like even if it was like, carbon doesn't do anything to global warming, it would make sense that a business that's run more sustainably would be a better business. In the short term, no. I would compare it to like McDonald's and a salad.
Yeah.
Like McDonald's feels good in the moment, but over the long term, it doesn't do too well.
Yeah, I mean, you look at all the dystopian movies and they're all, dry desert landscapes and stuff like that. It's like because the planet's heated up too much. It's not a great place to live. And then you look at the ones that are nice and utopian. They tend to be really green. So I it's not whether or not you agree with climate change. I kind of think the latter's a better version anyway. And I guess I would prefer that we were heading that way because I think that's a better way. One of the big challenges around the economics of what you're talking about is, who moves first may be at a disadvantage because it costs a bit more to produce those products or something. That's one of the big handbrakes or, areas that are getting not debated because nobody really talks about it. But it's, it's one of the big things. If we move first and our competitors move later, then they potentially will end up selling more than we will. But, all you're doing is then shifting the commodities into a worse performing country away from a better performing country because People follow the dollar. So they say they want to be green, but are they willing to stump it up? Particularly, with inflation like it is, you then starting to chase the more green whatever it is, in your day-to-day purchasing decisions.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like, how would you differentiate yourself? This is a bit woo-woo because I was talking to a lady about energy and stuff because I'm a hippie at heart, but I'm also, a capitalist, so I'm confused with myself. But like you think of even just my state of mind when I'm around someone and I feel like I have clear intent. I'm not conflicted with how I'm feeling in the way that I contribute to them and to my world. And you think of an organization that even if they're manufacturing, it's very woo-woo, but if they're making conscious decisions about the impact, whether it's pollution, being smart with energy, whether it's doing right by staff, and then the branding is consistent to that, because branding is just really just, I believe, sort of like people, and how do you, like, there's very few brands where it's not people. Even Nike is just someone else's people.
Yeah.
Elon Musk, Tesla. So I wonder what, like, if we were able to get data on it, comparing a business that's doing right by people and doing right by the environment, how would that extrapolate over the long term?
Yeah. I mean, there's always, I had this little discussion with somebody the other day. So people are always pulling out stats that, businesses that do X outperform others by Y, and that's kind of great. But I kind of look at it and go, I think it's more the businesses that are forward looking, they've got their act sorted, and so they're working on things earlier than other businesses, and it's because they're doing that, that's why they perform better. And the businesses that are looking forward are dealing with those things now. Like I say, there's all these businesses that have been dealing with climate change or diversity or a whole bunch of really important topics for the last 10 years, and the rest of us weren't even thinking about it properly. So those businesses are the ones that are doing really well, and they will keep doing well, businesses that are forward looking. And so I think that's the really important thing. If we look backwards or just stay where we are, then those are the ones, the businesses or the people or whatever, they're the ones that are going to be challenged or are challenged already.
Well, here's some dangerous territory for you, so see if you want to answer or not. But there'll be some people out there watching this and being like, you know what, I feel like it's just a play for control, using the whole global warming thing just so they can exert more control and regulation and stuff. Would you have any 2 cents on that, or would you sidestep it?
I run a business, and our business isn't any different. There's no one trying to control us. There's no one trying to control the businesses around here. There's no Uber machine running the place.
Illuminati?
No, I don't.
They snuck you in a room and told you.
Well, if they're doing it really well hidden, and it's just ridiculous, in my opinion, that people think that could be occurring. That you've got all these really smart people out there doing stuff, and they're all controlled somehow by some small group of people somewhere. I mean, yeah. So I just find it incredible that people can actually believe that. Yeah, and see, I see the conspiracy stuff pops up every now and then. They're really funny because it's just like really. I mean, I can see why and how you might stitch that together, but that's just not happening. So I don't know. I could take the eyes out of the back of the head, they could say, but I just think it's really funny.
Okay, all right.
Personally, yeah.
Well, you didn't dodge it, so fair enough. We won't go a bit more into it. So what was like when you first decided to start the business, or you came in later? What was that moment where you're like going from? Have you always been an entrepreneur, or you suddenly you're like, oh yeah?
Good question. Have I always been an entrepreneur? My dad's a sparky, he owned his own company, and then sold that, and then he bought a fish and chip shop and all that sort of stuff. Cool. So and so maybe I picked up that bug a little bit a while ago, and so years ago, me and a friend bought a software company and built that up and then sold it. And then so that was my first entrepreneurial moment. I was about 30 then. And that was amazing. It was really cool. It was such an experience of taking on that. And, we had amazing liberating times and then just terrifying times, going into Christmas and wondering whether you can pay the payroll. and wondering whether you're going to keep your house, and all of those things. It's just highs and lows, so it's a real roller coaster. And then working for large corporates, really tired of working on the vendor side and going, why do they keep mucking this up? Why do they keep making it so hard? And so wanting to go on the client side and build the thing that we're trying to build, rather than being the vendor trying to convince them to do it. And so I did that for a while, and that was kind of cool. And when you're in corporates, you get to work with some amazing people, super smart people that are really good at what they do, and you learn a massive amount from them as well. And so I've always kind of had this balance between, being a vendor selling to companies, being a company buying from vendors, working in small companies, working in large companies. And they've all got, a reasonably positive person, and kind of look at each of them and go, what are the best of each bit? And yeah, there are some bad bits around politics or, the risks. And take lots of learning experiences from all of those, and just really kind of loving each of them for what they were. And, worked for a super entrepreneurial guy over a period not too far ago, who created lots of opportunities for us. He was, I guess his entrepreneurial streak, he enabled us to want out and go out and do things too, and he never kind of stifled that. And then he enabled me into my kind of first CEO role of a SaaS company, and that was a global SaaS. And so again, giving me opportunities to do things was pretty cool, because I guess I had that bent. So, long way of saying, probably I really enjoy both for different reasons. And entrepreneurial's got its, it's a little bit lonelier. Is particularly, any CEOs felt it. Anyone who's got to go out and do it themselves has felt it. It's, if you don't push forward, nothing's going to push forward. But yeah, corporate's awesome and entrepreneurial's awesome, and I've really enjoyed both. But yeah, they're very different, very different.
What have you learned? Like, so you're probably sitting at two extremes of businesses, starting out, middle, corporate. Yeah. What leads to a well-run corporate at scale? I can get the whole 15 people. I've done that.
Yeah.
Then I can just talk to them. When that gets to systems.
Yeah. So, when I joined the last one, I joined that company because the guy that owned it, he was acquiring the company I worked for, and he was super decisive, and he said to me that he believed a business should be able to change direction in 45 days, and I went, that's got to be a cool company to work for. If you can be that aligned. And, particularly when you've got this technology background and you run the IT systems, it says a lot for what you've got to be in order to deliver to that. And that's a pretty exciting place to be. You've got to be really on your game. You've got to have everything really clear about what you're doing. And, yeah, like I say, that's a pretty inspirational vision. And so that was what made me join that company, is, when he talked to me about that and a lot of the other things he said. But, yeah, so I think as a leader, you've got to kind of create the business that you think will succeed, and that business, to me, needs to be a dynamic business that is forward-looking and has a team that are really well aligned around it. I mean, the software company that a friend and I owned, we were involved, partnered with Microsoft. And Microsoft, you go over to the conferences in the States and stuff, and there's 15, 20,000 people sitting in a room. And again, I talked to my team about this, and there's 20,000 people in, say, the Staples Broadway Centre or something, the big basketball arena in LA, and you'd be listening to one of the heads talk, in this case Steve Ballmer, or one of the Microsoft giants, and you'd be sitting next to all the Microsoft partners, and we're all listening to what they were saying, and I'd come out of the room going, what the heck just happened? Because you could virtually see, of the 15,000 people in the room, half of them, the Microsoft people, changed direction in an instant, and they would go, last year we were selling this, we were incentivized this way, this is what we were talking to you about, and now we're doing that. And that was done in 45 minutes. He would get up on the stage, say, this is what we're doing, we were this, now we're all in on that, or whatever big Microsoft thing they would say, and throw out the Kool-Aid. And all the Microsoft people would come out and they would know their new direction in 45 minutes. I mean, that is incredible. And they knew, they then had a conference shortly afterwards, and they would go away to that, and they knew all their KPIs were going to come out. They knew how they were going to be incented. They knew where things were going. They would get their collateral and get all the information they needed, and away they would go. That's amazing to be able to turn a business like that in such a short space of time. And I guess I'm driven by change. I'm a change agent. If it was a let's grow by 3%, let's grow by 6%, that wouldn't interest me at all. Drive me crazy. But when you're talking about transformation and really shifting the dial on a business, that's what excites me. And so building businesses that can do that, and how you need to be able to treat your team and how engaged you need your team and all of those things, that's pretty inspiring. And I think if a leader can do that, that's what their job is, really.
Interesting. Well, we've done 41 minutes. How does a leader do that?
Oh, crap. I'd like to say I don't know. I think that oh man, it's so complicated.
Or what works for you?
Yeah. I guess firstly, you never really know. Well, you probably know when you get there, but I try and put the foundation stones in place, right? Make sure I've got the right people in the right place, make sure they understand their roles, what I'm expecting of them, and then paint out that picture of where we want to be and try and set that up right. And that's people, process, and making sure they've got the right strategy and vision. And there's so many good people who talk about high performing teams that how you put that together, so much more qualified than I. So it's really about inspiring them, setting up, painting a vision that they can actually understand and buy into, getting the right people in the right roles, helping them succeed. I'm not a micromanager. I tend to give the people a lot of room because people tend to like that. Treating them well, one of my high horses is, there's so many people that bash companies, but actually, and there are bad companies out there, yeah, absolutely, but so many companies are not. People, the managers are people too. They want to treat people well because they trust them. And if you trust somebody, if something happens, well, that's okay. It happens. Nobody, very few people are being malicious about things out there, and managers and team members. So, building an environment around trust and responsibility, and making sure that people can succeed. It's all those little things that add up to being the big things. But yeah, you look at sports teams and what makes them great, and it's about it's never just having the best players on the team or anything like that. You can build great teams out of people who aren't necessarily the Lionel Messis of the world. It's really about having a team that works really, really well together.
Do you do the hiring component, or is it more you get given a person and you're like, this is your role? Like, what is the main thing you do in your day to day?
Yeah, all the books and podcasts say that the CEO should spend 20 or 30% of their time on hiring, which seems incredible. I don't know where I'd find that time. I like to be involved in as many processes as I can. We've really started shifting our hiring process to more away from the less kind of functional questions, can you give me an example of this, of something you'll do in their day, or how will you deal with conflict, or whatever that is, to more I like to ask difficult questions, give them the I think it's the Clayton's choice, the choice that there is no right answer, to just see what answer they're going to give. Will they give an answer? Will they actually commit to a path, or will they see it for what it is, or those sorts of things, just to understand them more, because so many questions now you can prepare for, and that's nice, but it doesn't really tell you about the person. So I like to be involved in the process. We also now ask, personally, what are you doing, reduce your impact, and a lot of people still aren't doing anything, and that's not unusual. But, there are people who are engaged and who have actually thought about it and are doing things. And those are, as a business, kind of more aligned with our values and where we want to be. But, yeah, the people who can actually look forward and demonstrate the values that are going to take them, that show a good fit between us. That's what's important. We've got lots wrong. We've got a whole bunch right, fortunately. hiring's tough, and I think the CEO should be involved in as many as they can.
Interesting, yeah, because we used to do recruitment for the sales job as well, and
super hard.
yeah, I love
sales
it.
is the hardest.
Oh, is it?
Oh, yeah.
I fucking love it.
Yeah, well, you're dealing with people who are good at talking,
Yeah.
good at convincing you of stuff, and it's just a really hard. In the last hire, the head of sales role, I think I did a reasonably good job. I had some really difficult questions in there. I found them on the internet.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, it was crazy. And there's so many resources out there that support you, and it's like. This one was a US one, the 10 questions you should be asking your new VP of sales before you hire them, and I downloaded those. I did some really difficult ones in there. It's like, tell me what my revenue will be like in 3 months after I hire you. It's like, wow, that's an impossible question, But some people would say 30% higher. It's like, yeah, really? How? It's like, yeah, no, that one didn't make the grade. And other people going, well, I can't give you an answer to that, but I can tell you I can do this. And, they're starting to get a lot more tangible, and they're the ones that want to work with you. So, so some really interesting questions, testing ones to see how they'll respond without being a dick about it. But, that's super hard. Sales is the hardest.
Interesting, yeah. I've heard all different sorts. As one is like make them feel like, reject them to see how they handle it, see if they push and want to be a part of it.
Yeah.
I personally think
being mean to people.
Nah, don't be a dick. But I believe most experience doesn't matter at all in sales, in my experience, and it's almost a bad thing because their cup's full.
Yeah, you've got to be optimistic in sales, right? And so it's the cup is full most of the time anyway, so they come from that place.
No, I was meaning more like they come in with preconceived notions on how they'll do it instead of with student mentality.
Yeah, yeah.
Because you can hire on values. My belief in sales is you just need to care more about the other person than they do, tell the truth, and have complete conviction in what you're selling.
Yeah.
So, because I used to get kids to sell for me, which is a bit fucked up, I guess, if you think, there's my first swear word. I did it right. We almost made it. But so I used to raise money for charity, and we raised a few $1 million in a year and a half. That's and you just talk to the kid will come up, what are you doing? And I'm like, oh, we're helping these kids and they have cancer, and they're like, oh my God, that's so sad. I'm like, can you go grab that person and tell them about it?
Yeah.
And they'll just go because they believe in it and they have good rapport.
Yeah.
So to me, it's less about testing their talent or their resolve. It's more their values, their vision, and also do they care and will they believe in the product?
Yeah.
Because sales it's just a transfer of belief. It's not really anything.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a salesman, but somebody told me one day. I mean, authenticity is kind of everything, isn't it, right? And I like helping people. So for me, when they said, "Oh, it's just helping people," not selling. You're not selling something to them that they don't want. If you can't help them, then that's okay. You find someone else you can help, and by helping people makes it easy for me to help them. Because I don't view it as sales.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I think for me that's what does it. Other people, different motivations, but yeah, it's about that authenticity, I think.
Cool. All right. Well, we've just done a podcast.
Excellent. Is it a surprise?
Yeah, one swear word. Mum will be proud.
Yeah. So we dropped a couple of dicks in there, but
oh yeah. I was quoting you in my defense. I didn't say it, but I like to abruptly end it because of retention. So thanks for coming on the podcast.
Appreciate it. Good fun.